Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Book Talkies show. For the joy of reading, today we have a very special book, and the title of the book is Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis. Some of you might know who C.S. Lewis is. Hint, Narnia, probably. If you know, he's the author of the Chronicles of Narnia book. I haven't read it because when I started reading, the book was still YA, and other than Harry Potter, nothing else clicked with me. So I still haven't read it. I'm glad that Anirudh told me that he has read it. So one of the very rare fiction books which he has read, but we'll probably bring that point up when we discuss this book with our guest speaker on the show. Our guest today is Adri Mendes, who is not only my colleague, but also leads, colleague by day and an awesome personality on the rest of the
The rest of the
night and
day.
rest of the day.
Calling for 8 hours a
Adri,
day.
yeah. So first of all, thank you very much, Adri, for being on the show and welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here and to talk to you guys. Thank you so much.
What do you do, not only in your professional life, but other than that as well? So over to you.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me, you guys. I'm super excited. I'm always up for talking about new things and things that bring me joy. So it's awesome that I get to talk about books with you guys. Well, my name is Adri Mendez. I'm from Costa Rica originally. I was born and raised there. And then when I was 5 years old, we moved to Cyprus. And then I was there for 5 years. Then we moved back to Costa Rica. I did high school there. And then I finished high school in Kenya in East Africa. So that has been a beautiful journey of traveling around. And then I moved to Prague 5 years ago to study graphic design. And I'm just a very visual person. I love art and creativity and all of that. And I started my own design business when I was 19. And that kind of led me into leading my own creative studio for the past couple of years. And that also, well, because I wanted to stay in Prague and I needed a visa, I started working full-time at a marketing company as a graphic designer. I didn't like that, so I am now working corporate with Costume and with KB, and so yeah, so I'm still a graphic designer. I did pause my design business this year so that I could focus more on my acting endeavors, which I started 3 years ago. I started acting as an extra, and then I started doing a lot more commercial and like modeling work. And lately, I've been getting more into film and TV. So in the past couple of months, I produced my own short film. I acted in another short film that was like post-apocalyptic. So the whole like weekend, I was, doing stunts and filled with fake blood all over. It was really crazy. And I also was part of a TV pilot that was filmed here in Prague a couple weeks ago.
All you've been doing over these last few years, I suddenly feel that I'm just whiling away time in my life. But it's really exciting to know all of this, and we are really glad to have you here, Adri. So we can go on and on talking about you, and we would absolutely love to, but just because the show is all about books, so just want to understand how and when did you really get in touch or really know about this book, Surprised by Joy? What really got you to read it? And what was your overall gut feeling experience after reading it?
Yeah, well, in my church, we have like a table of resources at the front, so you could just kind of like take any book that there is there. There's a bunch of like self-help books and also like fiction books or things, just general resources. And I saw this one and I saw that it says C.S. Lewis, and I grew up loving Narnia. I had the whole it's not a trilogy, like the whole, how do you call it when it's like a
Series?
series of books, yeah. Sorry, I forget words sometimes. So I had the whole series of books when I was younger, and I remember those books so vividly. It's very difficult for me to remember things vividly because there's just so much going on in here that that usually I remember a glimpse of it. But I remember reading the first one in the series, which is The Magician's Nephew or something like that, and I remember it so vividly. And so I've always, and I grew up with like the movies and stuff, so C.S. Lewis was a big part of my growing up. And so I saw this book on the resource table a couple months ago, and I picked it up and I was looking at it, and a friend of mine came over and she wanted to say hi, and she looked at this book in my hand. She's like, that is a great book, you have to read it. So I immediately took it with me and I was like, okay, this is great, like I already have a good recommendation. And I started reading it, like and it just was so, the first thing that popped into my head was, this is really good vocabulary practice, because this book was, I have it here, it was written in 1956, so it's quite an old book, and it uses a lot of kind of oldish English or oldish wordings for things. So it's really good vocabulary if you want to like expand that. That's the first reason why I'm like, this is a very interesting book if you like the English language. And also it just gives you so much more of a glimpse of just like a writer's life, right? Because as a creative myself, I do believe that my whole life experiences inspire my work, and the ones that I put all my heart and soul in. So I know that your life really inspires your work. And so I was really interested in seeing how C.S. Lewis's life inspired all of his work, but mostly like the Narnia books. And it was so interesting to see how, even at the beginning, there's a section where he's talking about how he used to draw these fictional animals and these mythological animals, and you can very well see those in Narnia. Also, a little bit of it was how he goes into like from being a Christian to being an atheist, going more into the occult things, and then going into Norse mythology, and then going back to Christianity. And I personally love Norse mythology, like just learning about it. I also love Greek mythology since I grew up in Cyprus. And so just learning how all of these things inspired him was really interesting. And then in general, like this is based obviously on him as a Christian, but I think it's a really good read in general about the exploration of the human life and like experiences. And it's a really great book. So when I read it, it just gives me so much like excitement, because I'm learning so much, and it's just a really cool book. So definitely recommend it.
The title of the book, I mean, it's a surprising title, Surprised by Joy, you know. And it's not the he has carefully not used happiness, but used the word joy. And that this 3-letter word is super important for us, you know, because before we started recording, I told you, right, there's a book that we had recorded, but we still haven't published. I'm not sure if we are going to publish it or not, but it's called The Book of Joy, written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I have this the description, or what they mean by joy to them, and it's a conversation. The book is literally a conversation between both these both these, I don't know what's the word, inspirational
figures,
inspirational figures. And the Archbishop says, you know, joy for him is, so joy is much bigger than happiness. While happiness is often seen as being dependent on external circumstances, joy is not. I mean, if you see that quote in the book and you just close your eyes, it just hits you. Does something like this, because I'm really interested in getting to know what is joy for him, for what was it for him in the book. Can you share something from this angle?
Yeah, to not give spoilers too much, I will try. But in general, what's really interesting is that he gives a whole explanation of what joy is, and it's not about just a feeling. It's an experience that you have from a specific something, right? And so I'm trying to see, because I have a lot of notes here, but he reflects on kind of the disappointment that can arise when these sorts of joys disappear, and how you can bring them back into your life at different points of your life. And so he reflects back on how as an adult, things that used to bring him joy as a like as a child are giving him joy again, and how there's
Oh.
things that used to give him joy as a middle schooler, you know, person in high school, that he kind of cringes at. Obviously he doesn't use the word cringe, but like he kind of cringes at, like, why would that ever bring me joy? So it's like this exploration of the situations that might bring you joy, and he uses a lot of nature references as well, of how nature can bring you joy, which is really beautiful. One of the coolest things is how you can also see from how a young age books gave him a lot of joy. And so that's also, like, as someone who loves to read books, it's just really cool to see, like, an actual author being so obsessed with books. and yeah, and also one really interesting thing that the book touches on is loss and grief, which I believe is something that all of us have experienced at some extent. And so it's also him showing how you can find that joy even while you're dealing with loss and grief of loved ones and situations in your life and stuff. So there's just a lot of descriptions that he gives about joy, and then he finally finds his joy in God and in his faith, which I think is a really beautiful thing, because for me personally, my faith is something that is very personal. It's very descriptive of me. If someone were to tell me, like, describe yourself in 2 words, I'd be like Christian and actor. That's just like creative and actor, or like creative and Christian, or something like that. And so yeah, seeing how someone is so passionate about their faith as well, you know, each of us have our own personal beliefs and our faiths and stuff, and so it's really wonderful to see someone stand so firm in their faith and see that joy comes from a source that they know to be true. And yeah, it's a really interesting way of seeing how joy can kind of spark depending on where you are in your life. But then as an adult, you kind of get to see more of, like, the true foundations of where your joy can come from, right? And it's not as fleeting as, you know, when you're younger and you're just like trying to live your life and understand. And I know that a lot of things that brought me joy when I was younger don't bring me joy anymore. so yeah, it's a really cool exploration of that, but it's also just it's such a cool understanding of life and people. And he describes people in such an interesting way, like the way that he talks about his mother and his family. He had a crush on one of his cousins, so that's really weird, but like he describes people really well. So as he, you know, he's such a fiction writer that he makes it feel like a story, but then you're like, oh shoot, this is actually his real life, right? He also went to boarding school, so he talks a lot about, like, his experiences in boarding school and how they were horrible. So it's just like, it's a very cool exploration of that. I don't know if that answers your question.
It'll again bring back the book of joy, and I think this time Archbishop answered His Holiness Dalai Lama's question, what is joy for you? And I think they get into a conversation, and on a broader perspective, what Dalai Lama says, that if you really want to think what are different aspects of joy, he says, I think there are 8 pillars of joy, and I've noted down here. He says amusement. I mean, it's so take it as the word comes, right? And you're amused by something that literally gives you that belly laugh. You know, you're literally laughing from the belly. You know, the way I think I know Jeff Bezos is known for his belly laugh. He laughs it out, you know. So that is one aspect of joy. Contentment. You're contented with something. Okay, it's not like, okay, you've run a marathon. You're not like, oh yeah. No, it's like you're at peace. You're contented. So that is joy. The third thing is excitement. So adri is equal to excitement is what we can see right now. You know, so yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Relief. Think from a perspective of someone who was in UK and now moved into one of the other European countries. Relief is joy for that person. Yeah. Then wonder. What Anirudh and I are facing, you know, it's wonder. So that's joy. Exaltation. maybe running your company, something which was tough for you, which you wouldn't have thought you can do, but you still have done it. That would have definitely brought you joy. Radiant pride, maybe your sister, your siblings, your parents achieved something, so you haven't done it, but someone whom you love, adore, has done it. So that also brings you joy. um, Elevation, I mean, so the example that Dalai Lama gives is, from having witnessed an act of kindness, that elevates you somehow. Gratitude, I mean, uh, whenever the word gratitude comes, I think I the first I see my mother's face. Always. She is such gem of a person, and I think every mother is. I mean, everyone would say that's my mother. That's the first word that comes. That's the first person that comes to you. Um, Rejoice, right? It's what in Buddhism they call. There's a term called as mudita. You rejoice in someone else's happiness, right? And spiritual radiance. That's the state that the mindfulness experts, that all these spiritual leaders, exactly, they encourage everyone to just experience that, and then you wouldn't have experienced anything else. That's what joy for you.
Yeah.
I mean, such clarity of a single word of joy I've never seen anywhere.
What stands out to me is that a lot of what you just mentioned are things that are very personal and very like spiritual, right? Compared to what you can call like worldly joys, which in many cases it can be like money, parties, connections, being known and stuff like that, which in a way can bring some sort of happiness, but is it really true joy? I think it has to go a bit deeper than that for it to be called joy. So I love those 8 pillars, because I think when you have those established, you can see like, oh, where can I find these sources of joy, right? In those 8 areas. So that's beautiful.
So, Adri, you mentioned that the author really found joy in spirituality when he found faith. So, in terms of his journey, and we haven't read the book yet, right? So, was it so that he had joy in his life till he was associated to Christianity, and then when he became an atheist, he realized, oh, life is not. There was a lot of suffering which came his way. He was finding means for joy, and then when he got himself associated back to Christianity, that's what really brought him joy. Or how is it like? Is it completely associated with faith, or was there joy which he found outside of that as well?
At the beginning, he talks a lot about the little joys that he had when he was younger. So he talks about the books and his world building with his brother, and the just like being outside and seeing nature. And I think there's a thing where he like has like I think it's a leaf or something, that it just brings him so much joy from his brother. And so it's like these little things. And then that's when he loses his mother very young. He's then brought up by a single dad who's also, suffering with the grief of his wife, and he's sent to boarding school with his dad, and that is where a lot of the difficult things start to happen. He's in a really bad boarding school. He then goes off to another elementary school where he starts doubting his faith a lot, and he's brought more into like really occult things through one of the teachers there, and then he completely becomes kind of like he says something really interesting where he believes in the occult, but he's also an atheist, which is, I think, a very kind of like, it doesn't really match, because if you believe in the occult, you should also believe in that there's a different area. But besides the point, I'm not a theologian, so I'm not really that person to talk about it. But then in that, he's just trying to find meaning in his life, and he's just trying to figure out, but he just doesn't believe that God would be the place for him to find any happiness. And then that's when he gets into Norse mythology, and he starts kind of bringing up this adoration towards them, or towards the literature of Norse mythology. And then through this time, he's just having like a really rough time, and it's just really difficult. And that's when he goes to university and he meets J.R.R. Tolkien, and he starts and Tolkien is the one who kind of brings C.S. Lewis into Christianity and shows him his faith again. So that's a really cool like circle of like how, you know, these incredible writers actually knew each other. I didn't know that until I read the book. And so then he finalizes that there are these little joys that you can have and these sources of joy that you can have in your life. But at the end, for him, it's all about his faith and his relationship with God, which as a Christian myself, it's really beautiful.
Is probably because, and you define yourself, right? You're creative and Christian, the two C's that represent you. For you, does faith bring some purpose in life? And through that, do you get that joy that you want to achieve?
Ooh, we're getting deep. Yes, 100%. A little bit about my faith journey. I grew up Pentecostal, and my parents were pastors when we were in Costa Rica, and I was just born into it, right? And I served in the church. I was a really big part of the community, and then I moved to Prague, and it's the most atheist country in Europe. I'm in my freshman year of university. I'm like, I have so much freedom that my parents don't need to know when I'm arriving home because I don't live with them anymore. It was like crazy. And I strayed away, very far away from my faith. And it wasn't like until a year later that I kind of felt this need of spirituality, need of connecting with my faith again. And I doubted, like there's been times where I doubted even the existence of God or the necessity of the church or necessity of faith. And now I'm at a place where it's not about if I'm a good Christian or if I go to church or if I do this or do that. It's more about my relationship with God. And I realized one of the things that make a lot of people sad or anxious is this, oh, but I don't have a purpose in life, or I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm on this earth for. And one thing that I'm fully convinced by is that my purpose is to know more about God and more about my faith. And so for me, my joy comes in knowing that everything that I do, let it be this podcast or let it be my acting work or just going to the grocery store, like something so normal, can be a spiritual experience and can just be about me learning about myself. I think it also has to come, it's an understanding of who you are and why you're created, right? And so in my personal view, it's like I'm created by God, and every time that I learn something about myself, every time I go to the therapist and we talk about my childhood traumas, like that's understanding my mind, understanding the creation that God did in me, right? So I definitely believe that faith has created a purpose in my life, and it has brought me joy. Am I 100% joyful? No. Am I 100%, am I like the poster child for Christianity? I don't believe so. But it's truly a balance, right? Of knowing that you will have good days, you will have bad days, but at the end, there's like this strong source in me that is my faith, and that my joy comes from that. And one of the things that I've been developing in my life is how do I get closer to that, and even in those bad days still have this joy. So even if I'm stressed or I'm scared or I'm tired or anything, like knowing that this will pass, and everything comes and goes, and at the end of the day, what are we left with, right? I can make loads of money, I can be famous, I can do this, I can do that, but at the end, like one of the things, one quote that a woman said to me a couple months ago was, at the end of your life, when people are at your funeral, do you want a eulogy or do you want a CV? AKA, do you want someone to stand in front of a crowd and say, Adri did this, and that. She was part of these films. She was part of these companies. She did this, she did that. Or actually give a moving speech about who you were as a person. And that for me has definitely, she obviously said it with like more of a faith outlook, but it's also in general, like who do we want to be as people and where can we find the joy in our everyday lives, I would say.
Fantastic. So, Adri, this has been phenomenal a different level of energy in this episode. We absolutely love this. And I think I have some more energy to go through this evening and for probably the remainder of this weekend.
There we
It's
go.
really it's really inspiring to see the great work you're doing and the passion that you have about things in just life in general and the overall optimism that you have. We absolutely love what you've talked about from your life as well as this book. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.